Salut Eats, and today we're talking with Dina.
Hello.
So Dina, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, like where you're from and your family?
Yes, I was born and raised in New Jersey. My family is from Italy, a very small town called Projector, which is about 2.5 hours outside of Rome in about south central Italy. And my mom and dad both came to America when they were kind of young. My mom came when she was about 9 years old. My dad came when he was about 23, although they're only about 2 years difference in age. But I grew up in a household with them and my grandmother upstairs in our two-family house.
Okay.
In New Jersey. Yeah.
In New Jersey. So, do you eat Italian food at home growing up, or?
Yes, by law, since I was born, I have to eat Italian food and as much cheese as possible, Marcia. Yes, we used to make it. We used to prepare everything from scratch, and to this day, I still eat Italian food, but I don't have the time to do it.
To prepare it from scratch.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what was the experience like growing up eating Italian food? Did you feel any challenges growing up as far as like in school? Any differences?
Yeah, yes. Actually, I keep saying to people, if anybody's ever seen certain movies that, kind of have that heritage, it's all very similar in that my parents would have whatever the meal was of the night before, they would give that to me for my leftovers to take with me to school. So I would walk in with a very greasy bag of leftover whatever on a piece of bread and be made fun of quite a bit because it wasn't traditional American bologna sandwiches or anything like that. So it was interesting getting poked fun of, but it expanded my horizons on what there is to eat. So it wasn't just American stuff. I learned about cooking and different kinds of foods from my parents' country, so that was important to me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Italian foods? What is that? Because here we usually think spaghetti and meatballs.
Yes.
And I've heard it's way more and different than just spaghetti and meatballs.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of pasta. The way that it's made, they can prepare it by hand, and by hand I mean they'll put the flour and the water and they crank it through a machine that will roll out very thin dough, or they'll do different things like by hand as well. But pizza, obviously, is the next thing that you'd probably think of. In Italy, everything is very fresh and very clean and not super drowned in any kind of sauces or anything like that. So when you see the difference in American dishes that are prepared as far as Italian meals are concerned, you can see that there's a lot of sauce, and that's not the way it is in Italy. The other things in Italy, it's a lot of meats and some heavier foods, but the thing about the Italian culture, if I can just venture into that for a sec, is that they do have very heavy meals. They sit at the table, they eat, we talk with our hands also, as you can see I'm doing, and then they go out for walks all the time. They go out for gelato, which is another thing that we like to have. Gelato's very yummy. Yeah, it's a nice creamy ice cream type of dessert. And so I think it's appropriate for that lifestyle to eat kind of heavier because they do engage in so much activity afterwards.
Okay, great. Growing up, was nutrition and that aspect important to your family as far as the kinds of food that you ate?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, they cooked and made everything fresh. We actually had a backyard farm, a little tiny garden patch, I would say, in our backyard. But everything was picked from there. So we had basil and different kinds of herbs and tomatoes. So they were very particular about where they got their food from. And if it was coming right out of our own ground, then obviously it was going to be a lot fresher and a lot more nutritious than purchasing it, say, from a store or someplace that we weren't aware of. And as far as health is concerned, it is the Mediterranean diet, which is now the big fad, the big trend, but also on purpose because it's a healthy diet. A lot of fish, a lot of olive oil, some wine if you're an alcohol drinker, so that helps keep blood going. So that was important to them. Rare was it ever that we had, a lot of desserts or anything too saturated or anything like that. There was a lot of olive oil and even though it was like a heavier, quote unquote, heavier fare as far as the pasta and the pizza was concerned, in that respect, everything was very light and fresh. So not too drowning in sauces. Yeah.
Great. So you mentioned that you still eat Italian food, but are you cooking it or are you going outside and eating?
It depends. My father has a rule never to pay for pasta outside the house because why should you if you know how to do it yourself? So I will buy pre-made things, like things in boxes but I do tend to make my own sauce. So
Okay.
not the way my mom and my grandmother used to do. That was an entire day on a Sunday where they would just churn the tomatoes and the
Yeah.
meats and so on this low flame for hours and hours on end. Nowadays, for me, it's a lot lighter. It's just some sauteed garlic and some fresh tomatoes and maybe a little sprinkle of pepper flakes or some chopped up fresh herbs or something like that. Very, very light, and a little squeeze of lemon or something to kind of jazz it up a little bit. Yeah.
Do you have any favorite Italian dishes in particular? Anything that pops?
Let's see. I'm not a big. I don't like a lot of sauces, so I do like lighter fare. So, and I'm a vegetarian. So pasta, just plain pasta, which is like pomodoro, which is just plain with tomato sauce on there, is kind of one of my favorites. And it's an old standby that I think it's a comfort food for me too. So when I'm feeling kind of meh, then I tend to go just for a plate of pasta. And then I know I'm talking about pasta a lot, but there's also something called aglio e olio, which is just plain olive oil and garlic. Very fresh, very clean, with a little grate of fresh cheese on top of it.
Okay.
And I think for me that always speaks of home and remembering, you know, my childhood and having the pasta dishes back then as well. And I think that's pretty much my main thing. So I hate to sound like, you know, this cliched Italian girl who's I love pasta, but I do love pasta. And yeah, so that would be my go-to dish at any time, and probably something I would serve to my friends.
So, have you ever been back to Italy before?
Yeah, I actually visited my mom and dad's hometown in Projector, and we also ventured out to Rome as well, and that was very interesting. It's teeny tiny, and it still is a very small culture and a small world, and they still all act as if it were, you know, hundreds of years ago. Everybody comes out and sits on their steps, and they walk through town, and they walk up the streets, and it's a nice feeling, and something that I think if you have the ability to go back and visit where your parents came from or where your heritage is, just to kind of understand how they grew up. I was able to stay in my dad's house.
Okay,
It's
like where he actually
grew up. Right. It's owned by his sister. It was left to her after his parents passed away, and so we were able to live there. I mean, now it's kind of modernized because she put in, you know, running water and things like that they didn't have back then.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting. She did give us a little tour of, you know, where they all used to play when they were kids, and the little fountain in the neighborhood that they would go and splash themselves in when it was hot and so on. So it was very cool.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So do you feel like your the culture is being passed down between you?
I'm gonna say yes and no. I mean, my parents have very specific values as well. I think that's partly to do with how they grew up. It's a very strict household that they had grown up. I can't say that every Italian family is like that.
Yeah.
So I take that, and I also take other kinds of traditions from them as well, as far as family matters go and work ethic goes and things along those lines. So I think for me, absolutely, I do believe that my peers of that generation might also have gotten a little Americanized, so maybe they're detaching from that. But for me, I actually enjoy being part of that environment. So way back when we used to only know each other, you know, we would all congregate and have events or do Christmas dinners or whatever at the little hall that we used to all go to as the parents' generation would congregate there to keep in touch with their, you know, their homeland and their people that they grew up with. And I think nowadays it's not like that at all. Like that place doesn't even exist anymore, unfortunately. So, but I appreciate what's been passed down to me. So for me, yes. Okay. But I will answer on a larger scale. So like as far as culture and Italian food here right now, especially in New York City, I mean, we have the ability to get some certain traditional meals and enjoy the way that they were prepared. But I think if you just go to a pizza joint or an Italian restaurant anywhere across America, it's not doing justice to what you find in Italy, unfortunately.
Which leads to my next question.
Yeah.
If you ever feel like Italian food homesick, is there a particular restaurant that you can get to here in New York City?
Oh, that's interesting.
Your family's from Jersey.
They're from Jersey. I grew up in Jersey. You know, it's interesting. I think I keep hearing my father say, you know, don't pay for pasta. So, so I kind of haven't chose. I feel like I would be cheating on my mom and my dad if I went and chose a restaurant. So I have to say no. I mean, there are places that I would go to if I want to get some food, but nothing that I venture to regularly. Sorry, New York City restaurants and New Jersey.
Recommendations.
I have no good Italian restaurants. No, that's not entirely true.
Unless you go to Dina's parents' home.
You go to my mom and dad's, they'll be happy. Well, you can help cook. You can help cook there. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you asked that because I'm trying to think when the last time was that I actually sat down and had an Italian meal. Okay, I will say there's Frank's restaurant, I think, on 1st or 2nd Avenue, if I'm not mistaken. They do it right. I will give them props.
Okay.
And John's on 12th Street is also a good one, too. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's where my boyfriend is actually ordering dinner from tonight. Yeah, so I will say
for pasta.
he's paying for pasta. Don't tell my mom and dad. Yeah. So those are the 2 places, but they're very close to my neighborhood. That's in the East Village.
Okay, so
Frank's on, I want to say 2nd Avenue, maybe definitely below 14th Street. And John's, which is on 12th Street, maybe somewhere between 3rd Avenue and Avenue A. Somewhere along that strip, you'll find John's.
Okay,
Yeah.
Frank's and John. And never pay for pasta.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, definitely give business to people if you want to, but yeah, try not, if you can make it at home, make it at home.
Okay. So what dish would you say encompasses the overall identity of Italy? If I was to say, Dina, I want to know, what is Italy?
Well, I don't think I can answer that specific question because Italy has, just like a lot of America, just like all of New York, has very distinct and different regions. So every region has its own dish or way of doing things and way of speaking too. A lot of the dialects, you go from south to north, you don't even understand people's Italian at that point.
Yes.
But I will say the one thing that I beg my mother to make every year because we just love it so much, and it encompasses her background, it encompasses the region where she grew up, but it also feels very homey and friendly to me, is a holiday dessert that she makes called I fritti, which is like a I fritti, Fritti, which is Italian for like fritters. So back in the day, it was a fried type of dessert. Nowadays, my mom tries to make it baked, which takes all the fun out of things, but it's much more healthy. But what it is it's interesting because I think nowadays people are doing like different things with hummus and chocolate hummus, and the chickpea is a big staple of what we do.
Yes.
So it's actually chickpea with grated chocolate and some honey, and I think maybe walnuts or something. I'm not sure if that's a traditional ingredient or not, but maybe you can add it. And then it's wrapped up in these like ravioli type of sheets of dough, and then deep fried. At the time it was deep fried. And then once it came out of the deep fryer, it would go into a pan or a large pot, and my mom would sprinkle like tons of granulated sugar all over it. So I mean, this was just, of course, this is why I'm begging for it every year. Like I said, nowadays it's a little bit more of a lighter fare. She tries to bake it, etc. But the fact that back in the day when I used to watch my mom and my grandma do this, they would peel the skin off of the chickpeas. Do you have any idea how hard that is to do?
Yeah, it's very hard.
Why would you bother? And they would peel the chickpea like this, and that's actually something that we were, as kids, assigned to do, like peel the chickpeas. Yeah. And then my grandmother would go and actually purchase a giant block of very, very good quality chocolate, and she would grate it. Who has time? Who has time to do that? And so that was something to me that it just took so much effort, and you could taste the quality in it. Yeah. So when I think that's what comes to mind to me. But I can't say for sure that is something that is made throughout Italy. I don't even really know for sure if it's made throughout Projector, where my parents grew up. Yeah. But I do know that every family had a version of it. So when we'd go to someone else's house, and they would say, we're taking out I fritti for Christmas, I would get so excited, and then I'd eat it and say, it doesn't taste like my mom's.
That's not grandma.
That's not mom's. No, this ain't no fritti. Exactly. So I gave a thumbs down to that, but that's why I always wanted my mom to do it, because it just felt so good. And then later on in life, I found out that she used to make them and freeze them, knowing that I would ask her for it as I got older. And because it takes an entire weekend to make this stuff. Yeah. So.
Do you know how to?
I do.
And when you
I
make
have
it?
never.
Okay.
Once again, I'm an American with no time. So yeah, I mean, at one point, maybe I will. Right now, I just don't have the equipment to do it. It does take the crank, and you have to flatten out the dough. I could take a lot of shortcuts with it, but if I wanted to do the traditional, I don't have a deep fryer. I don't have anything like that. Okay. So maybe one day, Marcia. Maybe one.
Maybe for my birthday.
Maybe for your birthday.
Okay.
Next 2 years from now.
Better than never.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of Italia with us.
You're welcome.
Okay, so grab your passports and let's see where in the world we end up next time. Ciao!